Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, the 2024 prequel film to 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. Like the movie this prequel charges into, every shot, every stunt, every piece of production design is so deliberate and reflects incredible attention to detail by George Miller and his team. So let us break down this movie scene by scene for details you might have missed. And by the way, I did a proper analysis of 2015's Fury Road over on the Deep Dive channel that you absolutely should watch along with this video. Okay, so Furiosa opens with a prologue similar to the prologue of 2015's Fury Road, where we hear some voices from the years the world started to fall apart. 000, what is your emergency? 911, what is your emergency? So 000 is the emergency number in Australia, which makes way more sense. 000, easier than 911. And then we hear a male voice that kind of sounds like Chris Hemsworth before he would have become Dementis. Nobody knows what's true anymore. We learn a bit about his backstory, that he lost a family. I wonder if this would have been right after he lost his family and he's just in his darkest hellhole. And he might just be calling 000 because he might be considering ending it all. If this is pre-Downfall Dementis, which would be possible because the Fury Road retcon in George Miller's prequel comics, it would set this phone call sometime between 2030 and 2050, and that would be Chris Hemsworth when he would be in his 20s based off of how old he seems to be in this movie. But that darkest moment, that pessimism would make him something of an enlightened thinker in an increasingly mad world, explaining why he could become something of the cult figure he is when we meet him later. So George Miller has added to the environmental crises and the natural resource wars another chilling threat that has begun to face us in the 9 years since Fury Road came out, the erosion of truth itself, because no one knows what's true anymore. But then we hear more voices. The power grid has collapsed. Currency is worthless. Cities are burning. Something pandemics. So again, the past 9 years we have seen crumbling infrastructure, inflation, civil unrest, a global pandemic. So basically, yeah, we are living in a dystopia now. Then Miller mixes in sounds and visuals that we heard exactly from the 2015 film's prologue.
The terminal freakout point. Mankind has gone rogue, terrorizing itself.
And then we hear a man reporting, gangs are swarming like locusts across the land. And then, echoing from 2015 Fury Road, more familiar audio, female voices taking over, the women who tried to warn the men that their gas wars were killing everything.
The earth is sour.
Our bones are poisoned. We have become half-life.
And we once again see the footage of the trees that were hit with the Upshot Not Whole Encore nuclear blast, the test in the Yucca Flats in Nevada in 1953. So half-life is George Miller's term for people who were born with nuclear fallout-induced deformations that resulted in their shorter lifespans. Then we see a shot of this elderly history man, aka a word burger, which is the term for a historian in this society who tattoos words of history, culture, and philosophy all over the skin to preserve some semblance of culture and history. In the bluish day for night shot, he asks the audience, as the world falls around us, how must we brave its cruelties? And then he fades like a djinn in the desert. This line echoes the quote that ended the 2015 Fury Road. Where must we go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves? Which was quoted from the first history man. This might be that same historian, but here he speaks to us directly before he fades into the desert night. He's played by George Svestov, who worked with George Miller on 3,000 Years of Longing. So a title on screen reads the first of 5 chapters in this film. 1. The Pole of Inaccessibility. In real-world geography, a pole of inaccessibility refers to the farthest and most difficult to access location in any landmass, the furthest away from any body of water. It's normally used to describe a northern pole and a southern pole, and in fact, the southern one of these poles is actually in a vast section of Antarctica that is claimed by Australia. But in this dystopia, it refers to this remote part of Australia called the Green Place. The symbol of this inaccessibility will stay with Furiosa for her entire life in this opening shot of her reaching for this forbidden fruit of a peach.
We've come too far.
And I love the detail of how these fruit are all swarmed with insects because there are no pesticides, and the ecosystem is still adjusting to there being so little flora to swarm around. But this particular peach will have the pit, the seed, that plays a very important role to the story as it goes on. Young Furiosa is played by Elila Brown, whom Miller had also worked with on 3,000 Years of Longing. The girl following Furiosa is credited as Little Valkyrie, meaning she is going to grow up to be Valkyrie, the nude Vuvellini in the tower that Max clocks as a trap.
That's bait.
Furiosa and Valkyrie see a group of men scouting the Green Place, and Valkyrie moves to cut their fuel lines. She's spotted and blows this whistle to warn the others. These include Mary Jo Bassa, Furiosa's mother, played by Charlie Fraser. Meanwhile, the Vuvellini general, the blonde on the horseback with a rifle, is played by Elsa Pataki from the Fast and Furious movies and Chris Hemsworth's wife. While in 2015's Fury Road, the Vuvellini were depicted as an all-female tribe who would kidnap men to force them into sex, procreate, keep the girls, and then toss the boys out to become crow fishers. Here we see some men with the tribe. The Green Place has wind wind turbines, solar panels. We have some hope. It truly is a place of abundance. They actually have a chance to build like a new electrical grid. But Furiosa gets taken and she wakes up with her head dangling from the side of a speeding motorcycle. But she uses this moment to bite the fuel line with her teeth to force the bike to stop. It's like they've had self-defense classes in case you ever get taken by one of these guys. The general tells Mary in a different language, none must live to tell of this place, and gives her a limited number of bullets for her sniper rifle, which Mary ends up applying with great economy. It was bad enough that these raiders killed a horse and cut it up for parts, not caring about how useful a horse could be as transportation instead of just food. But Mary catches up to them, first on horseback, but then by quickly patching a motorcycle and coming within sniping distance. So the raiders fairly cleverly drag tires behind their bikes to kick up sand to make it harder to shoot at them. When Mary transfers parts over from the lesser bike to the thunder bike, she clips in a fuel tank with what looks like an airplane seatbelt, because everything is found parts in this movie. And as we saw before, George Miller framed all these shots so that his wife Margaret Sixel, when she was cutting this film, would have all the action centered perfectly in the exact center of the shot, so our eyes wouldn't have to quickly move around the frame whenever they were quick cutting. Also, as he did so well in 2015's Fury Road, George Miller does so good day for night filming, shooting all nighttime scenes at daytime, but then recoloring with this blue tint so that nighttime scenes will be visible, something that people who work on Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon do not know how to do. Furiosa tries to flee on foot, but she's scooped back up and brought to the biker horde camp. Immediately, each of the bikers try to claim this as their own find, but Furiosa severs the throat of the one who actually would know where the green place is, which Mary sees through her sniper scope and says, good girl. Inside the tent, Dementis is shown a motorcycle that a seller says was made out of a single-cylinder regular aircraft engine, capable of 2,800 cc's. So an important production design detail for George Miller in both this film and in 2015's Fury Road is that every vehicle, every prop, every costume item could not be something that they originally crafted, but had to have come from some other used item that they found in scrapyards or warehouses or yard sales that they repurposed into something else. So for example, later in this movie, we see the Doof Warrior again, and his guitar bass is made out of a hospital bedpan. So whenever you rewatch scenes in this movie, be like, oh, that's that thing, or that's that thing. So Furiosa is brought in to meet Dementis, who wears this billowing tarp as a robe. Clearly, he sees himself as a kind of religious figure. Chris Hemsworth, if you notice, wore contact lenses that made one of his pupils extremely dilated, kind of askew, so anytime he delivered any lines, he would just look a little crazy. Angus Sampson returns from 2015's Fury Road as the organic mechanic, who apparently before working for Demorton Joe was with Dementis' biker horde. There's also the Octoboss with the horned helmet. He's played by Goran D. Clute, the 6'6" actor who has played a number of roles over the years, but I will always think of him as that Powan Lampe Fey just off to the side of the main guy in Utapau in Revenge of the Sith. The crouching man is named Smeg, whose name might come from this line in Fury Road when the Dag says that Max is, quote, a crazy Smeg who eats Schlanger, a line that means nothing but probably is something extremely gross. And then the bald one is Fang, played by Matus, who recently appeared in The Fall Guy earlier this month. Dementis carries with him a stuffed teddy bear. Now in Road Warrior, the Toady carried stuffed animals on his belt just like this. We learn later that this bear comes from the family that Dementis had lost. Furiosa's capturer was Toe Jam, played by David Field, and I have to wonder if Toe Jam is connected in some tangential way to Toe Cutter, who is Hugh Case Burns' character in the first Mad Max film. So these men fuss over Furiosa, and Toe Jam and Dementis whistles, and Smeg and the dogs turn their heads at the same time. So Smeg must be somewhere between a person and a dog to this gang. I'm just fascinated by Smeg in this movie. Mary takes the skull helmet of one of the disposed riders, and I just love how it's held together with staples and a padlock, and its jawbone now hangs like a strap over her neck. There's this really creepy detail when Furiosa is bathed and changed by the female of the group, and a guard watches while rotating these steel stress balls in his palm. Like, dude, why do you need to de-stress right now? Is this like your cold shower? Either way, gross. The others start to eat the peach, but Mary comes in and uses one of those steel stress balls as a slingshot that she fashioned using one of the gears of the motorbike. Mary attacks in the cover of a sandstorm, and I think we can see young Furiosa just clocking all of this and seeing a sandstorm as a natural cover from this point in which to lose her enemies, just as she will during the pursuit in Fury Road. Fang shoots her fuel tank and she catches fire, but it doesn't stop Mary. She looks like a freaking fury of mythology. Mary's bleeding wounds give her a trail that she cannot shake, so she finds a wedge point in the canyon and gives Furiosa the peach pit to plant in the green place one day. Mary takes out quite a few of the bikers, but Furiosa runs back to find her mom being crucified and tortured with her feet over an open fire. Dementis makes Furiosa watch and asks the history man for context on tears, and he recites that tears of pain versus tears of joy have different chemical compositions and tastes. He may be referring to the varying chemical compositions of basal tears, reflex tears, and emotional tears. Basal tears are just the lubrication that's always in our eyes. Reflex tears come from external irritants tints and smells and vapors, but all emotional tears, whether from joy or from suffering, have the same chemical composition. It's not, as Dementis says, that sorrow is more zesty. Okay, we move on to chapter 2, Lessons from the Wasteland. Dementis' horde conquers another gang and plays this vicious Thunderdome-like game of winnowing 20 of them down to 5 by forcing them to fight each other, and each of them to take one bike attached to the conquered leader's appendages to peel out and draw and quarter him.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
Now, the lady of this trial group is Mr. Norton, who's also played by Elsa Pataky in a double role. Her face is scarred and deformed to make her unrecognizable. So when he says lady, Chris Hemsworth is referring to his wife. Furiosa spends her time locked in the cage cart with the History Man and the dogs, and her mouth is clamped shut so she can't bite anyone. She uses the History Man's tattoo ink to draw a star map on her arm that could lead her back to the green place. Dementis' horde sees a red smoke flare explode and finds the lone war boy who's so programmed in the cult of Immortan Joe that he doesn't know what words like abundance mean. They fire another red flare and the dust spreads on Dementis, permanently staining his cape and giving him a taste of Immortan Joe's power that, from this point forward, is a curse that he will never be able to shake. I love that Dementis' horde has a pre-choreographed routine whenever they encounter a new group to conquer. Like Smeg goes out first and raises his arm as they rev their engines together to simulate a lion roar, and then the History Man comes out with the mic and does the hype man thing to introduce Dementis, and then Dementis appeals not to the leaders but to the inevitably oppressed commoners of these groups to mutinize their leaders, all while Smeg faces these commoners to pantomime their plight. Now, Smeg is played by David Collins, who was one half of the Australian comedy duo The Umbilical Brothers, in which one would pantomime out stories while the other would do sound effects. So it's cool of George Miller to work him into the movie this way. But Dementis underestimates how brainwashed Joe's have-lives are, promising them as much water as they want, but not knowing that Joe always tells his people, do not become addicted to water, and has conditioned them to accept restraint and scarcity. So Immortan Joe steps out, now played by Lachie Holm, who also plays Dementis' lieutenant, the open eye-socketed Rizdale Pell. But as Joe, he's replacing Hugh Case Byrne since the actor passed away in 2020. At Joe's side is the cannibalistic nipple play lover, the People Eater, coming back from the first film, and Joe's son's Rictus Erectus, who also returns from the 2015 film, but also his other son Scrotus, who we did not see in Fury Road. He is known as Scabrous Scrotus in the prequel comics and first appeared in the 2015 game, but the other son that we saw in Fury Road, Corpus Colossus, does not appear in this film as Quentin Kenihan passed away in 2018. The People Eater tells Dementis to pick one champion from his war boys to fight one of his champions, but the war boy simply screams witness and zip lines down the cables to drop down on Dementis' bikers and blow himself up. The People Eater calls Dementis a fool for challenging them because their boys are too far gone, willing to sacrifice their lives as kamikazes just for Joe, with the promise of making it to Valhalla. Cranes and hooks are already set up, ready to snatch all of Dementis' vehicles, and we learn this war boy they found was actually a trap. Really, they just needed Max.
That's bait.
This is truly the lesson of the wasteland of this chapter's title, and it's really Furiosa who learns these lessons. Furiosa is nearly dragged into this hole. This is the same hole that she will later end up back in when she meets the maggot healers. Dementis retreats and adapts, finding Gastown, the second fortress of the wasteland, the location that was mentioned in the 2015 film but never shown. It's depicted as an oil refinery surrounded by a moat of oil. Together with the Octoboss, his forces overtake a war rig, and they disguise some of their men as war boys with white clay, staging a raid from his own forces to kind of Trojan horse the rig into Gastown, but that includes actually having to convincingly kill the Octoboss's guys to make the gate guards think that this is real, or as he will later say to Furiosa, to make it epic. Now, this Gastown leader has been repainting this painting from a book as a fresco on the wall. This is Hylas and the Nymphs, an 1896 oil painting by John William Waterhouse. It depicts the moment from the Greek and Roman legend of the tragic youth Hylas, based on accounts by Ovid and other ancient writers, in which the enraptured Hylas is abducted by the Naiads, female water nymphs, while seeking drinking water. So obviously you can see how it's thematically important to people who are dying of thirst. And I like how this leader's wearing a marching band uniform under his cloak, and 10 years later from this in the future, we'll see Dementis wearing that same marching band top when he takes over Gastown. We want to thank Geology for sponsoring this video, but also to thank them for making sure we look camera ready all day, every day. Geology is a 29-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and GQ. Geology's products use just a handful of powerful, proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades. If you don't know where to start, Geology can create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine for you. All you gotta do is take a quick 30-second quiz. Geology can help you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. Right now, if you use code NewRockstars100, Geology will give you 100% off their award-winning skincare trial set. You'll also get an additional bonus offer of up to 30% off one skin, hair, or body product when you add it to your trial. That's 100% off plus an additional 30% off. That's a lot of off. Just click the link in the description or go to geolog.ie/rockstars100 to get started. Smeg returns to the Citadel, giving them the torn out page in the Waterhouse painting with the Gastown leader's severed finger with the ring on it. So with the painting print, it's also kind of a metaphor that your guzzling natural resource is as important as water and is now controlled by a new authority. Dementis arrives with the Gastown leader's head in a death trap rigged to Dementis' nipples with the kind of foolish threat to blow up Gastown unless his demands are met. Joe notices Furiosa, whom Dementis initially claims to be his daughter, but I honestly think he sees her as his daughter figure. And it's proposed to try to marry her off to Joe in a political marriage, but Furiosa tells the truth that Dementis actually slaughtered her mother, and Joe offers to increase his food and water shipment by a quarter every 10 days. And with 10 days instead of a week, I just appreciate that it seems like they dispensed with the 7-day weeks in favor of a metric 10-day quantity. And Joe just wants in exchange tankers full of gasoline as well as Furiosa and the organic mechanic. Dementis walks off saying, "What a day, what a deal, what a day," echoing Nux's "What a day, what a lovely day" exclamation, because here in the Wasteland, every day counts, right? Furiosa is brought into Joe's vault with his other wives back when there were quite a few more than the 5 who were left at the start of Fury Road. Presumably all of these women kept giving birth to stillborns or half-lives, and a lot of them became the milkers that we see at the beginning of Fury Road. Rictus is a total pedo and strokes Furiosa's hair, so at night she shaves it off and turns it into this clever wig cap, hiding the peach pit seed in her mouth, justifying why she never talks and maintains this vow of silence. We're kind of reminded of the gold watch in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, an uncomfortable lump that's carried in a cavity for years and years to serve some greater symbolic purpose. In total, Anya Taylor-Joy has something like 30 speaking lines in this film, and she described working on this film as a lonely experience, but hasn't gone into too much detail. Furiosa uses the wig cap to slip away from Rictus and uses axle grease to disguise herself as a war pup. Meanwhile, her wig catches on this branch, and George Miller shows us the passage of time as the branch grows and grows around it and through it, foreshadowing the possible fate of Dementis as the peach tree grows out of him. As they haul up a tow truck in the windy day, Furiosa bravely hops on the truck to reconnect the pulley chain, leading to Scrotus awarding her the job of lever puller that allows her to cover her hands and her arm map with these gloves. So in a sense, this is the first thing that Furiosa does that is to make it epic. Okay, on to chapter 3, the stowaway. This is about the 1-hour mark in the movie, and now finally Anya Taylor-Joy enters the picture as Furiosa has aged into a valuable mechanic invited to the House of Holy Motors to assemble the war rig. We see it equipped with a construction excavator arm in the rear with the bomby knocker contraption that we saw in Fury Road. We meet Praetorian Jack, the driver, played by Tom Burke, who played Orson Welles in Mank. Originally, the part was cast as Yahya Abdul-Mateen II before Mateen had to leave due to scheduling conflicts. Also joining this crew is a young war pup played by an Australian boy named Caden Bales, who has a type of dwarfism known as achondroplasia, and he went viral in 2020 from a video made by his mother after he was unfortunately bullied in school. And George Miller saw this video and was so affected by it that he put Caden in the film, and I think it's so awesome. So we arrive at the best sequence of this film, this 15-minute stairway to nowhere sequence in which the Octobos's forces raid the war rig with wave after wave of aerial assaults. It took Miller's crew 78 days to shoot with 200 people working on it daily. This sequence begins with just the road itself, as we see Immortan Joe's sigil of the skull on the steering wheel, and it has been tagged with the twisted Octobos horns, a sign of which rogue forces have claimed this road. One raider skids on the sand with metallic bottoms to his shoes and then opens a parachute to parasail above the war rig and hit it with thunder sticks. And then Miller swings the camera around to another glider who has done the same on the other side. 2 war boys on fire decide to witness themselves and tug one of these gliders down, tugging his tow bike onto the war rig too. But this whole sequence is just a perfectly storyboarded and executed causal chain of cause and effect and escalation, because the rig's second engine has a leak from the first wave, so more war boys are fed onto the rig to defend it, and a second wave of untethered gliders with parachutes and then huge backstrap bands to propel themselves forward attack now. And I don't understand the physics of it, but it looks cool. That keeps the war boys' attention skyward as raiders on bikes come from below and attach sticks of dynamite to the rig. Furiosa kicks them away, snips the fuse, and keeps the dynamite. But to keep the war rig from overheating, this one war boy, who apparently just keeps a ton of piss tanks on him, decides to try to cool it with urine, saying, "Here, war rig, drink this piss." And this piss boy snatches Furiosa's dynamite and jumps back with it into the raider car, screaming, "Witness!" And it blows up, angling it over the hood of the rig. So Furiosa has to take her cap off to grab the skull engine cap since it's been in the fire, and that finally reveals reveals her long, fiery hair to Jack. She's not a boy, she's Furiosa. So at this point, they just cannot stop staring at each other. They take turns in the cab, shooting at the other gliders, fighting one off that tries to grab Furiosa. Then Miller cuts back to Caden in the back with the cabbages, just spraying silver chrome on his palm. I just love this little character beat. And then the third wave is a single hang glider that looks like it's powered by a propeller lifted off of a boat if you look closely. It sprays the cab with fire, and then when it comes around, Furiosa is ready for it, operating the excavator arm to take it out. And final phase is Octopus himself flying in. His motorcycle is lifted by a vast squid-like balloon that we saw hovering over the biker horde camp earlier. He sprays the rig with machine gun fire. Furiosa is like Quint in Jaws, firing a harpoon at him and begins to reel him in like a shark. But she tells the pup to finally now turn on the bombing knocker, but the poor kid waits too long. He ends up getting killed, and it forces Furiosa to slide down and turn it on, chewing up the Octopus and his balloon, and it looks sick. So Jack offers Furiosa the chance to join him as he now has to rebuild his crew, and he offers to make her a road warrior and to teach her everything he knows. And so the stowaway of this chapter, a mechanic never meant to join this rig outside of the Citadel, graduates into a Praetorian driver. Bring us to chapter 4, Homeward. Furiosa now smears axle grease on her forehead, getting visually closer and closer to the Charlize, their own Furiosa that we knew in 2015. She and Jack drive the rig to the Bullet Farm, the third fortress of the Wasteland, another location referenced in Fury Road. It's a smelting plant built in an excavated pit. The Bullet Farmer, Major Kalishnikov, is played by Richard Carter, returning from the 2015 film. Then they do a run to Gastown, which under Dementis' rule has crumbled down into shit. The Waterhouse mural has been defaced, the common workers are rioting and disrupt the trade of food for guzzling. We see how historically conquerors like Dementis may be effective in nomadic states when they have to overtake fortresses, but they are completely useless as rulers. So naturally, he does all he knows how to do. He breaks the peace treaty and sparks another war, telling the other rulers to meet for a summit at the Citadel, but really taking his forces to the Bullet Farm to take it over and set up an ambush. But before this, Jack helps Furiosa stitch up her wound from Gastown. Jack says as his parents were soldiers in the army as the world fell, they might have actually served the militia that formed under Joe when he was still a colonel in the army. But Furiosa shows Jack her peach pit seed, the first time she has shown it to anyone since her mother gave it to her, and there's definitely some reproductive imagery coded into that exchange. This same spot will later be where Furiosa possibly plants the seed in Dementis' corpse. On their way to the Bullet Farm, Jack reassigns Furiosa from the war rig cab to the pursuit car, a 1960 Plymouth Valiant with modded suspension, which she perceives as a slight, but it's actually to protect her because he senses this ambush. And sure enough, Jack sees his dog with a severed foot in his mouth, never a good sign, and the ambush begins. Furiosa's left in the Valiant outside the gates, but I find it interesting that anytime Furiosa could leave and save herself in this film, she never leaves a loved one behind, whether it's her mother or if it's Jack. But Jack fires a green dust flare to signal to her a green light to leave, but no, she comes back to provide sniper cover fire for Jack to keep Dementis' crew's RPGs away from the rig. Dementis and Fang figure out where the fire is coming from, so he fires a rocket at Furiosa's perch, and Jack rams the rig into the brick tower, giving them enough time to escape, but Dementis pursues them in his monster truck. He rams Valiant and crushes Furiosa's arm, leading to the injury that will define her final form. Dementis captures them.
Where are you going? Sorry, Bullet Hard. There is no road!
Yeah, it kind of reminds us of the final History Man's quote at the end of the 2015 film, "Where must we go?" But it seems that even Dementis has forgotten about the possibility of a green place full of abundance that could be out there. They chain up Furiosa's injured arm, the one with the star map tattoo, and force her to watch as they drag Jack in circles and let the dogs devour his body. But as the sun sets, they find only Furiosa's severed arm. She chose savage survival over the promise of home in the green place that she would need her arm to get to, meaning she's taking a step toward madness and physical transformation like Dementis. In this Homeward chapter, she has given up hope for home. When her stolen bike gasses out, she stumbles into the desert on foot, reminding us of her stagger in Fury Road when she realizes the green place is gone. But then, hey, up on the crest, leaning up against his V8 Interceptor, the Pursuit Special, it's Max Rocketansky. He's not played by Tom Hardy here. This is Jacob Tumuri, who played Tom Hardy's stunt performer as Max in Fury Road, and he's the stunt coordinator for this film. He's framed looking out over the expanse just like he is in the opening shot of the 2015 film. He sees Furiosa collapse, so presumably he is the one who rescued her by bringing her back to the Citadel. If so, that would mean his time with her in Fury Road would be a reunion, not a first meeting between the characters, but neither of the characters would know who each other are from this episode. So Furiosa wakes up in the maggot cave and demands to see Joe. She tells Joe that Dementis started the fire at Gastown to make him think that's where he is, but Joe decides to make Dementis think he's going to Gastown, and we see Joe's Giga Horse from the 2015 Fury Road film making an appearance in this decoy caravan. And then the voice of the History Man takes over to narrate this constant cycle of war throughout history. He says the Sumerian fought the Elamite, the Saxon fought the Viking, and so the histories grew. There were the Wars of the Roses, the Oranges, the Opium Wars, and then one day, 1,000-day wars, north against south, east against west, the first, second, third, countless wars, the oil wars, the water wars, the battle of the boomtowns, and now the 40-day wasteland war. So we're getting a hint at the world wars of the 20th century, but then presumably a third world war in the 21st century, and then oil wars that probably went down to the Middle East, and then water wars because, you know, we are running out of drinking water, oh God. But then battles of boomtowns, I think might be referring to a nuclear conflict and now leading to this 40-day wasteland war. We see flashes of familiar sights from Fury Road during this, including the polecats and the doof warrior with his flaming guitar. Furiosa assembles a new mechanical arm and shaves her head, telling them, I need a vehicle. And her voice is so deep, I could have sworn it was Charlize Theron doing the voiceover, but it was actually just a really, really solid impression by Anya Taylor-Joy. As she speeds off to face Dementis, the final chapter, 5, Beyond Vengeance, shows up on screen. Now, Beyond Vengeance is a chapter title that does echo the title Beyond Thunderdome, but it represents how Furiosa's life quest really needs to extend beyond mere short-term vengeance against Dementis. Like her mother Mary chasing the raiders in the dunes, Furiosa hunts down what's left of Dementis' inner circle. Smeg gets swallowed up in loose sand. Rizdale Pell gets attacked by the Rock Riders from the 2015 film. Dementis tries to ride into a sandstorm, but wakes up to find his water bottle / his bike dismantled and Furiosa waiting for him. So he surrenders and Furiosa reveals herself to him. Hemsworth's performance in this scene in particular is delightfully unhinged. It echoes Heath Ledger as the Joker from The Dark Knight and Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, but this scene reminds me of a cross between specifically the Batman Joker interrogation scene in The Dark Knight with the repeated punches, crossed with Elizabeth Swann getting to know the real Captain Jack on Tortuga. In both instances, the madman is trying to convince the character who tries to live by a code to embrace the chaos and the anarchy. Dementis taunts Furiosa that he too wanted a big belly full of vengeance for his magnificent lovelies that he had lost, and like Furiosa's peach pit, he carries the weight of the stuffed bear with him to remind him of that. But that vengeance brought him to where he is now, and he tells Furiosa that that's what she is too. He says, we are the already dead, little D. But he leaves her with this question.
Do you have it in you to make it epic?
It's a great thematic summation of what George Miller is trying to do with this film, as a fable that constructs the power of myth and legend. In a wasteland, when everyone is living half-lives at best, all we really have to live for is to create a lesson with which to leave the next generation, to live our lives in a way to inspire others to try to live better lives. In a dystopia, that means living epically, to make bold choices that people will remember. So we end this legend not with a definitive ending for what Furiosa did to Dementis, but offers us 3 possible endings, kind of like Clue. Option A, she shoots him after hours of silence. Option B, she replicates the punishment he gave her mother and roasts him over a pit in a kind of crucifixion. And then option C, which the history man claims is the truth, whispered to him by Furiosa herself, or is he just saying that because it's the artsy ending that he prefers? We'll never know. But what he describes is this image of an emaciated Dementis as a new peach tree grows out of his dying body in the Citadel watering hole. So in Greek mythology, Daphne was a Greek tree spirit, the daughter of the river god Peneus. Apollo offended Eros by mocking his archery skills, so Eros filled him with lust for Daphne, while he filled Daphne with the hatred for anything romantic, and Apollo chased her and chased her and chased her until she just called out for Peneus desperately for help, and he turned her into a laurel tree. And I kind of feel like there's a mix from that reference to the fate of the Titan Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and was chained to a rock for eternity as his innards were pecked out by birds. And once again, we come back to the image of a peach plucked by Furiosa, but she tells us this is our first fruit, but it's not for you or me, as her narration is shifting to the 5 wives that she breaks free in the moments before Fury Road begins. The splendid Angharad, the Dag, Tosa Knowing, Cheetah the Fragile, and Capable. Actually, George Miller confirmed to interviewer Kevin McCarthy, who is so good at interviewing people who work on films, that Angharad's name was actually a reference to John Ford's How Green Was My Valley. So as this movie pivots into Fury Road, Furiosa completes the promise of this movie to make it epic, because epic myths are apocryphal by nature. You don't print the truth, you print the legend. And by planting the peach seed in the Citadel, Furiosa unknowingly establishes a true green place for herself, something that she can come home to when she realizes her former home of the green place is actually gone. Now, this movie doesn't have a post-credit scene so much as it has a 2-second shot of Nux's bobblehead bird skull spring-mounted dashboard ornament, which was seen inside Nux's Chevy 5 window coupe in the 2015 film. While we could interpret this as a clue that another Mad Max prequel film could be in the works showing the rise of Nux, fat chance of that given this movie's box office, this object I believe carries a deeper thematic significance. For one, the long-beaked bird skull reflects the Plague Doctor mask during the Black Death, which befits the have-lives being lived by this plagued society. But also, seeing Nux's Dash figurine tells us that the audience of this movie's story, the recipient of the History Man's epic account of Furiosa, is the character character that I've always maintained is the most dynamic figure of the 2015 film, the character who changes the most, Nux, because it is his hearing of the over-the-top myth of Furiosa that instills Nux with enough change potential to break free of his doomed life path and be of actual use to Furiosa and Max and the Five Wives. So this bouncing head is Nux's adrenaline as he was so excited by what he heard the history man tell about Furiosa and as he prepares to make it epic, to make a difference. Comment down below with what you loved about this film. Follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.